Oh man. So hey, should we wait for a couple more minutes to do a little to make sure that we get everybody here before we do stuff? Maybe as a warm up. Hey Steve, I just got off a conversation with Steve. Steve's got some recent results from NASA. They're just mind blowing. So you want to share that for a couple minutes?
Sure, yeah. So some folks at George Washington University did a study using a series of challenges, and they kind of outbriefed some of their results. It was really interesting. They ran a series of 17 robotic arm challenges on Freelancer, and we priced those prizes ranging from $250 to $5,000. So total price tag for all of those challenges was total cost of about $25,000. What we found at the end was that 8 of the 9 designs that we got were better performing than our NASA designs.
Wow.
And what was really interesting is when they studied where all these people were coming from, the most valuable innovations actually came from roboticists who no longer called themselves roboticists because they were in other fields. And so they weren't core roboticists, they were kind of on this edge. And it was really interesting. And the other 2 things I think we found, not so much out of that one, but out of some other research, is that challenges and open innovation are turning out to be this really great way to extract work information from retiring workers and transferring that to new workers, because the activity of defining the challenge, the criteria, understanding that problem becomes this really rich information environment. And so challenges are interesting there. And the other one was that the scientists were participating in challenges, R&D challenges, because that it was one of the only places they could have no consequence failure. So every place else, their manager would tell them what they could research and what they couldn't because of limited funds and low risk. They were in school, their professors would tell them what they couldn't research. And this way they could actually go fail on their own. So anyway, those are my 3 open innovation fun stories.
I totally love that. I think that's really paradigm shifting, especially when 8 of the 9 designs are better than the stuff at NASA. So super cool. Thanks, man.
That's great.
Appreciate that. Hey, should we jump to a little breakout?
Let's do it. Just adding a couple more people. Hang on a sec. And
Steve, I think it's really interesting that there are roboticists that aren't roboticists, and the power of like a label. Yeah. In terms of stifling creativity. Well, I'm not a roboticist, so I can't do that. Versus hey, I've got a great idea to contribute to this contest. Doesn't even lawyers can do it. I don't know if we go that far, but
even lawyers?
I don't know. I don't know about it. That's probably a bridge too far.
Yeah, that's great. Well, tell us before we go out, tell us the story about the woman who just won the challenge, who started as a psychiatrist or psychologist.
Yeah, we just had a challenge to make this like a robotic crane, right, for lunar surface, and it's inflatable, so it's really kind of an interesting crane. The woman who won it first won a challenge like 4 years ago for a storyboard design, and she was a psychologist, and she's just kept coming back to our NASA challenges. And every time she would, the next time she would have a CAD design, and the time after that, she'd have a 3D printed design. And now she's like making robots. And I actually got to talk to her when I was in Australia, and it ended up, she was basically inspired by these challenges to go learn these new things. And now she's like doing a PhD program in quantum physics.
Wow. Wow.
Just amazing.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Well, awesome. Well, hey, should we go to breakout?
Sounds great. We'll see you all in about 5 or 6 minutes.
Oh man. So hey, should we wait for a couple more minutes to do a little to make sure that we get everybody here before we do stuff? Maybe as a warm up. Hey Steve, I just got off a conversation with Steve. Steve's got some recent results from NASA. They're just mind blowing. So you want to share that for a couple minutes?
Sure, yeah. So some folks at George Washington University did a study using a series of challenges, and they kind of outbriefed some of their results. It was really interesting. They ran a series of 17 robotic arm challenges on Freelancer, and we priced those prizes ranging from $250 to $5,000. So total price tag for all of those challenges was total cost of about $25,000. What we found at the end was that 8 of the 9 designs that we got were better performing than our NASA designs.
Wow.
And what was really interesting is when they studied where all these people were coming from, the most valuable innovations actually came from roboticists who no longer called themselves roboticists because they were in other fields. And so they weren't core roboticists, they were kind of on this edge. And it was really interesting. And the other 2 things I think we found, not so much out of that one, but out of some other research, is that challenges and open innovation are turning out to be this really great way to extract work information from retiring workers and transferring that to new workers, because the activity of defining the challenge, the criteria, understanding that problem becomes this really rich information environment. And so challenges are interesting there. And the other one was that the scientists were participating in challenges, R&D challenges, because that it was one of the only places they could have no consequence failure. So every place else, their manager would tell them what they could research and what they couldn't because of limited funds and low risk. They were in school, their professors would tell them what they couldn't research. And this way they could actually go fail on their own. So anyway, those are my 3 open innovation fun stories.
I totally love that. I think that's really paradigm shifting, especially when 8 of the 9 designs are better than the stuff at NASA. So super cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's great.
Appreciate that. Hey, should we jump to a little breakout?
Let's do it. Just adding a couple more people. Hang on a sec. And
Steve, I think it's really interesting that there are roboticists that aren't roboticists, and the power of like a label in terms of stifling creativity. Well, I'm not a roboticist, so I can't do that. Versus like, hey, I've got a great idea to contribute to this contest. Doesn't, like, even lawyers can do it. I don't know if we go that far, but
Even lawyers?
I don't know. I don't know about it. That's probably a bridge too far.
Yeah, that's great. Well, tell us before we go out, tell us the story about the woman who just won the challenge, who started as a psychiatrist or psychologist.
Yeah, we just had a challenge to make this like robotic crane, right, for lunar surface, and it's inflatable, so it's really kind of an interesting crane. The woman who won it first won a challenge like 4 years ago for a storyboard design, and she was a psychologist, and she's just kept coming back to our NASA challenges. And every time she would, like the next time she would have a CAD design, and the time after that she'd have a 3D printed design. And now she's like making robots. And I actually got to talk to her when I was in Australia, and it ended up, she was basically inspired by these challenges to go learn these new things. And now she's like doing a PhD program in quantum physics.
Wow. Wow.
Just amazing.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Well, awesome. Well, hey, should we go to breakout?
Sounds great. We'll see you all in about 5 or 6 minutes.
Appreciate it. Let's see. Jin's on, I think, right? Are you on? Is Jin here?
Yeah, man. Sorry, I was trying to get off.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just an update. Jin and I got our book deal done with Harvard Business Press. We're really stoked about it. Thanks and for all the support. We're going to be calling on you guys a lot to help us out and help us understand kind of what's really happening. Things have been moving really, really fast. So as you heard from all the great stuff that Steve Rader shared, but Jin, you got a couple of minutes just to let us know what's happening at the lab.
Yeah, I just got a tour of our fantastic new facilities. Harvard just constructed a 500,000 square foot building, and we've got the top floor at LISH, and it's just very green building. It's awesome. We're excited about it. I have some photos. Let me try to pull it up here in a minute. But yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. And again, I'm excited to kind of, the new challenge is the hybrid working model. So I'm aggressively tackling that and trying to get people to, again, collaborate on site as well as collaborate remotely still. So we're going to kind of be at the frontier of that sort of thing. Some stuff that we've been looking into that I think is super relevant and super curious is, how do we think about all this stuff in terms of data and digital again? Because the other half of my job outside of open is sort of sitting at that intersection, but really thinking hard about, what does this mean in terms of like consumer centric, or it's human centric AI is kind of more the buzzy thing, but how do we think about using these technologies at scale, and what is sort of the appropriate response for companies and how they govern it and what they use and what they don't. So I'm sure many of you here know, we tackle some issues here at Harvard regarding ethics and, and security and all that stuff when it comes to AI. But I think there's a different component of this that has to do with the future of work, where we're talking about how we're assessing these different things, different tools that arise, these advanced technologies, Industry 4.0 stuff. To quote a good colleague of mine here, Tim DiStefano, who's our lead economist, and he just recently presented at the Vatican, and one of the points he made was, when the printing press happened, that essentially changed the world, right? Like there was social forces, political forces, religious forces, and I think we're at an interesting point in time with our own technology where we don't really know where all this stuff leads, and especially on the labor side and the workforce side as well. So is one way to kind of think about some of the social implications of what's going on. So we're going to be digging in pretty heavily around here on that stuff. Certainly would love to hear some of your perspectives on it. All of it leads to obviously crowds doing work. So that's my bread and butter. I'm going to, eat that till I die. But I think, these are tremendous opportunities to think about it, and what that sort of corporate social responsibility is as well on this work. Someone just mentioned we were supposed to have that OA thing in Boulder. John was supposed to host this, but unfortunately we weren't able to do it last year. But stuff's opening up around the university, hopefully maybe by late fall or early to late winter. Nobody wants to be here in Boston in winter, so let's just call it spring, whatever spring we get. But yeah, would love to do something around, again, the book, around gatherings. Met a lot of you recently, again, in the last year or so. So I think it'd be a good time for us to do some sort of gathering together and start planning for it. So
yeah, I love that.
That's all I got. There's a ton of more stuff that John and I have been chatting about. We're just on the framework side, and some of the things that we want to work with you on the book. So please be tuned. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Jim. That's awesome. Hey, before we dive into the program, anybody who's new on the call, take maybe 30 seconds or so, just introduce yourself. First timers, any first timers out there? No?
First timer.
Yeah, right. There we go. Go for it, Katrina.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Katrina Gamoida-Smith. I've been working with John and the Open Assembly team, really thinking about the training and certification of coaches program, which you'll see in just a few minutes, some of the work that we've been doing on it. My background is really in kind of like product ownership, enablement, project management, a variety of things. I wear a lot of different hats because I work in a kind of a startup environment. But yeah, I've been working with John and the Open Assembly team for the last 3 weeks. So thank you all for having me.
Yeah, so Katrina's going to walk us through where we're going on the training and certification. Super exciting stuff. She's done a great job of leading the team with Barry. So hold on to that. And then Doug, great to see you on the call.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me and inviting me into your little secret society here.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I was fortunate to meet John through someone who has a great name. His name is Doug Atkin. So it's another Doug Atkin. who is one of the early employees at Airbnb. So it's a long story, but that's how I was fortunate enough to meet John. My background is in marketplaces, and which has evolved very much into the future of work. So I ran the first electronic competitor to NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange called Instinet, and became fortunate enough to become CEO and take that public. And then I've invested number of other stops, but I've invested quite a bit throughout the years with two colleagues. One is Tom Closer, who used to run Reuters, and the other is Duncan Niederauer, who ran the New York Stock Exchange. And we formalized what we've been doing informally a few years ago and launched a fund. Marketplaces are absolutely key part of our investment thesis. And when the future of work marketplaces started to appear, and also tools and services to help companies, CEOs better manage their assets, like a portfolio manager would manage their securities, we got very interested. So I've been doing a lot of investing in the space, and then teamed up with a really good group of operators and launched something called Z-Work, which is a SPAC focused on the future of work.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Doug. Really glad to have you guys, both you guys here. It's really awesome. I think we're going to jump right into the programming. Hey, Barry, you want to kick us off and talk a little bit about what we've done with training certification, and then Katrina can walk us through all the amazing details of the progress that we've done in the last couple of days of sprints.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't want to steal Katrina's thunder, because she's basically done such a great job. Her and Jeff joined us about 3 weeks ago and have basically managed and facilitated things brilliantly. But we put together a course, which we think is pretty good, and Katrina's going to walk us through it in a second. We're really excited about it. We're going to do the first couple of cohorts hopefully with some of you guys, so you can act as a sort of co-creators, and we can sort of riff off each other a little bit till we get the content sort of sorted. But it's really exciting. It's going to be done in sprints, and we got big plans for it. So yeah, I think it's just exactly what we need to get some sort of standardization and some consistency around how those of us who are consultants take the world of open talent and open innovation to the market. So yeah, awesome. I think I'll just hand over to Katrina. To be honest, she'll talk us through the details.
Go for it, Katrina.
Perfect. Okay, let me go ahead and grab a screen here. So like I said, joined, maybe it was 3 weeks ago. It could have been a little bit longer. Time is a little abstract, but really seeking to design a program for the training of certification and coaches for the future of open talent. And when like Barry said, when Jeff and I came on, what we determined as critical path was coming up with the content and the curriculum of this program. And the best way that we could think to do this was by conducting a design sprint. And so we did kind of a modified design sprint motion, just 2 days, but we accomplished a lot, which is what you're looking at in just the 2 days. The first day we did really just interviews with experts and asked a variety of questions. I'll talk a little bit through that. And then the second day we sorted through our how might we's, our lightning demos, and really came up with the first prototype of this curriculum for cohort 1, and really what we anticipate maybe being the blueprint for the first 3 cohorts, if not the model at scale. And so I'll just dive in real quick here and give you an overview of what we started to work with. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, great. So a couple of things we let out with here. The first is our long-term goal. So the long-term goal for Open Assembly and the future of work in the open talent model is to transform work for 1 billion people by 2025. What I would call a big, hairy, audacious goal, but as we take it into bits and pieces, I think it becomes more digestible. So the two problem statements for this design sprint, we had one for both consultants and enterprises. As a consultant in the open talent space, I need to be confident in my understanding of the framework, which is over here, and approach to guiding enterprises in open talent best practices. And as an enterprise, I want my consultant to be trusted, informed, knowledgeable, and current. My brand becomes associated with the consulting agency. I would be proud to have my consultant represent my brand. I need an open talent Sherpa. So this is what we laid out before our experts alongside the framework here, which is the networked organization framework. If folks haven't seen this before, really it's something, it's what we believe, what John Winsor has let out and Barry, and believing this is the blueprint for building a networked organization model, right? Both coaches and consultants and future participants should be well versed in this model to support the future of the future of work / open talent model. And there's kind of two models within this. We've got the color spectrum here, and then the way it is implemented down below. So color, comms, org structure, leadership, operations, and relationship. And essentially this implementation model goes into each of these verticals and repeats itself as a flywheel. This isn't meant to be comprehensive in a sense that each organization should have to do the entire color spectrum, but more so an identification of the opportunities within an enterprise, and then running the implementation flywheel in the opportunity verticals that have been identified. And so this is what we laid out before our experts. We got a lot of great feedback, which we turned into how might we's, which I have below here. There's a lot here, I'm not going to dive into it, but really what all of this led to is us building the prototype of the first cohort for the training and certification of coaches program. And the reason I keep saying that is because we're still looking for a name for this, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But this is what we've landed with. So 4 sessions here. They're 2 to 2.5 hours per session, probably spread out across a bi-weekly time frame, so probably 8 weeks in total. Each one models kind of like a pre-meeting, meeting, and homework kind of structure. And this is what we have. And I'll just spend some time going through this. So pre-meeting, right, for the first session, really just onboarding, getting ready, getting everybody in the right tools, understanding the framework, listening to certain podcasts, and getting ready to embark on this journey across the 8 weeks with probably a cohort of 10 to 12 participants. The first session, the first hour of the session is really an overview with John Winsor, laying the landscape for open talent, some of the macro trends of why we're moving towards an open talent model, reviewing the framework of the color spectrum and the flywheel that I mentioned within each vertical. The second hour of the first session, again, just reviewing the open talent landscape, right? Working in partnership with many partners of the platforms that have been represented in the mural, and just taking a look at the open talent landscape, understanding the different categories of the ecosystem, which platforms work best for different models, right? Really just laying the groundwork for what this open talent landscape looks like in the future of work. And then homework, taking a partner, selecting a brief, selecting one brief from the first session and conducting a quick win exercise, and a couple of other homework exercises that result in some pre-work for session 2. Session 2 is all about assessing the organization and selling the organization. So when we think of...
That's awesome. Thanks, Katrina. This is really, really awesome. Let's go to Q&A if anybody has any questions, but maybe Jeff, do you have any, like a minute that you want to add anything here before we go to Q&A?
No, I think that was a great job, Katrina. Thanks so much for your leadership there. You know, Devin played a big role, and Catherine and Bryn and Barry. It's really an all-star group. So it's been fun. John, with the core team, and then all of the experts. We know you're busy experts, so thanks for making the time, and hopefully you can find your thumbprint on that work. I guess the only thing I would underscore is it's designed to be insanely practical, right? So not only do you get good community, and you know, it's our hope that those 12 that are in that first cohort are helping each other and you know, challenging each other, growing with each other well beyond cohort 1. But the other thing is, like, it's our goal that you walk away from session 4 with like a toolkit of, you know what, when I'm looking to assess an organization, like, I might iterate from here, but this is like my standard go-to for that. And not only is that Diane's best ideas, but it's got a shake of Barry on there, and a little bit of Balaji and your other cohort members and Brian, et cetera. So I think that combination of, like, you know, learning in community and just deepening those relationships, plus that toolkit is really our focus for at least the first couple cohorts. And then I would also just say that, you know, Balaji asked a good question. It's our vision that participants in the first couple of cohorts are already in this field, right? And so this is an opportunity to augment that experience. Steve Rader's contest might be so simple a lawyer can do it, but that's not what we're thinking for this cohort 1. This cohort 1 is really, you know, those people who've already been in this industry and are looking to dive even deeper in this moment.
Awesome. Well, thanks for adding that. Any Q&A? Let's open it up for a couple minutes. Any thoughts? Any comments? Yeah, go for it. Let's see. Hey, Jerry.
Yeah, I would like, first of all, congratulations. I think it's really kind of a lot of work went into it. But let me try to propose a parallel experiment, which is based on what we know about learning. And I've been running now the Reimagine Education program, which is global competition for the most effective pedagogical approaches, for 7 years. And if there's one conclusion, is that people don't learn by listening to sessions. The only way of learning is through experiential learning. Which suggests let's experiment with designing a flipped classroom. This has major advantages. You can take all the lectures that you were planning here, create videos from them, and provide them as a preparation instead of your homework. This will be the homework, they learn it. Bring them in only for interaction, only for applying it. How do you apply it? This is the way they will learn it. Also, by creating the e-learning material, you will be able to scale it and use it then forever. You don't have to have a demand every time on John or all the others to be the lecturers, because you recorded this and you created. Also, there is tons of material about a lot of the topics you mentioned. So you don't have to create everything. You can be a curator. You can then basically be the curator of the material, and then run this in parallel to the program that you developed and see which one works better. And as you develop the material, then you can decide what would be the best approach to try to do it.
That's awesome, Jerry. Always great insights. Really appreciate that. I think the goal here is to use this as an experiment and get to exactly where you're thinking we should be. Is this should be more digital and asynchronous, and ability to have people walk through and then create community as well. So really appreciate that. Any other questions, thoughts?
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah. Hey, Marianne.
About the certification, because I guess with my Myers-Briggs hat on, you have to be certified to give a psychometric assessment of some sorts of psychometric assessments. So it's sort of like a good housekeeping seal of approval. You took the course, you're credentialed, but on the other side of that, we're also a certified B Corp. So that certification is very different. That's the demonstration of a standard, and that's something that has to be redone every 3 years, and you have to prove it with data, not just saying, yeah, we're committed to certain things. You have to show that, you reimbursed a certain number of employees for tuition and all these other kind of things with stuff. So I guess I'm wondering how you're viewing the certification. Is it the standard of approval, or is it something, a larger commitment to a movement?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would say we've got two different things going on. What you're going to hear about next is a great setup for actually the next section, because it's accreditation of platforms, right? That's what we're really talking about. Because we looked at the B Corp stuff, we looked at, you know, the lead certification as ways to kind of get everybody aligned. Because I think there's a lot of confusion out there on, there's so many different platforms used in so many different ways that, you know, how do we get all that stuff aligned and so that we've got some common agreements and that people are committed, platforms are committed, and it helps the demand side to actually, you know, cut down on the time it takes to select a platform. I don't know, maybe this is a good pivot, and then we can save other questions till a little bit later. But Brian, do you want to lead us out on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank Marion for the strong lead in to what I was exactly going to present. There's actually nomenclature and words that she used in that I'm going to just basically that's already in there. No one saw me typing in response to her great comments. So just to show that it was. So the work stream we're going to talk about now is platform certification and accreditation. It's the update we're going to go through really quickly because we have 20 minutes, and as is pretty common when I do things tend to, the programs seem to get a little longer than expected. So if we go back to the goal of putting 1 billion people to work in the open talent economy as CTW as a stated goal, one of the things that we have to do is recognize that work is going to fundamentally change moving forward. And we talk about the confusion among the different sorts of challenges in terms of the ecosystem. In the past, we look at simple employees and apprentices, but now with the inclusion of open talent, it becomes a dizzying array of ways in which organizations, enterprises can get stuff done, and also that people can choose to work. So it begs the question, you know, what are the ways that we can incorporate these new and evolving talent sources to get some additional scale to achieve that $1 billion goal? When we think about these open talent models, these are just some of the examples of them, but really it's about disintermediating traditional work paradigms to leverage existing technologies and new technologies to match supply and demand. And so when you think about that as the governing criteria, it gets really complicated because each of these solutions has their own pluses and minuses. They fit into different sorts of ways. So what are the things that we can do that are uniform to all of them that allow us to really foster adoption? So when we think of product adoption, where are we as an ecosystem, as an industry, as a global economy with some of these newer technologies? Well, I like to think that we are probably in the product adoption curve right about there. I think that we're moving beyond. Some of our things are certainly in the tech innovation standpoint. Certainly some of the early adopters are taking these on. But at the enterprise level, and to get the sufficient amount of scale, we are probably in the early stage of adoption. And we're not quite where we are kind of something that the people are really going to look into as incorporating into their overarching strategy just yet. So how do we get there? How do we start to move that ball? Well, I think I'd like to take a page from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A lot of you are very educated people on the phone. They understand what this is, but it really highlights the fact that the basic human needs, food, safety, really kind of really are something that needs to be taken care of before you can move up into more higher order sort of areas of understanding. So taking that as kind of almost like a proxy for adoption, we really need to start looking at V1. How do we go about addressing the human nature, the need for individuals to feel like these solutions are safe? How do we build that safety mechanism that experimenting with open talent or working with open talent is safe? One provider is safer than another. Once we start to really get that sort of understanding of what it takes for people to build that safety, that sort of trust, then we can start moving up the versions of the accreditation, the focus on things like quality of output. How do we differentiate the needs? Maybe we're going to take a certification that will really call balls and strikes, winners and losers. But in the beginning, the fundamental preposition we need to do is focus on the basic nomenclature, the basic ways that we can address safety and trust issues at the front end of any enterprise contract, okay? So when we think about that, trust, it becomes the currency of the platform economy. And I always like to use this metaphor to really reinforce what the platform economy and what platforms do, okay? And the most accessible example is Uber. Uber, everyone's taken an Uber, but when we think about Uber in the philosophical terms, it's really no different than basically hitchhiking. But what does Uber do to differentiate themselves from hitchhiking? They create a trusting mechanism that allows you to trust the car is going to show up in a safe manner, that you're going to be tracked, and you're going to understand the background check of the driver. And then the driver gets to understand exactly what the stranger is, who these strangers getting into my car. So the fundamental proposition of Uber is that it's not like other platform providers, it's not a provider of rideshare services, but a connecting mechanism between drivers and riders. And this requires for their business to be a reliable generator of trust at scale. And that's the key element that we're really kind of finding as we do this, is that for open talent to be successful, we need to be able to generate and focus and highlight the ability to create trust at scale. Without that trust, all of this stuff is going to go. So that kind of really informed the perspective when we took upon the sprint and what we're going to do that. So how do we go about doing it? We referenced the leads energy, which is certainly a objective of where we want to go as a team within the certification. We eventually will keep gradations and be able to differentiate between different levels of accreditation. But in the beginning, I think it's more appropriate to think of just like the good seal of good housekeeping, which Marion referenced before, which is surprising. But it really is more of a binary sort of approach where we say, okay, in the beginning, we're going to focus only on the fact that we have a reputable platform. They have an existing business model. They have an evidence of successful execution of enterprise business at scale. And they show a good growth path, and they're accommodating what we would try to determine were the basic needs or the 3-foot hurdle for platforms to be successful at enterprises. So that kind of informed the sprint meeting. I don't want to go into some of the detail. This is some of the sprint detail that we have. I'm not going to go into it because it's not quite as nicely organized as Barry's and teams just yet, but it just shows the chaos of insight. And thanks to everybody who participated, both in the core team as well as the experts. It was incredibly valuable to get to their insight. But what we arrived at was a couple of 3 core personas and problem statements. One, the enterprise lead sponsor. They were certainly interested in understanding that the solutions were going to do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to address the concerns, and they're going to basically deliver the talent and the outputs that I'm expecting, because my personal brand is going to be inextricably tied to the platform. The platforms themselves, I think that we're looking for a way to increase their institutional presence and a roadmap of development so that they can focus on developing some basic capabilities to achieve eventual scale. And of course, talent, we want to create a fair and equitable environment where talent is able to differentiate between the platforms and focus on ones that are going to treat them well and give them opportunities to succeed. Out of that, we learned that much is required to increase trust is simply to reduce the cognitive load. So when we think about cognitive load, the ability to differentiate amongst the incredible universe of 7,000 different sort of platform structures and across multiple geographies, how do we go about differentiating that? So we arrived at a much more simple approach. In the past, I referenced the 5 dimensions of decision, but we've kind of amended that to 3/4. These are some of the platform planks as we referenced before. So here's the data that we're going to capture as part of the initiative. I'm going this relatively fast. At the end of the call, Brandon's going to make available a survey link, as well as we'll make some of this content available so you can differentiate into some of the amongst some of the elements. But when we think about general core information that we're going to capture from all the platforms, general organizational information, employment classification was a huge issue across every single one we talked to. Security and privacy, how are you protecting intellectual property? Fiscal process and ability, especially if you're doing fiscal transactions within the application. Technology roadmap, platform improvement, and then also other key contract divisions. How do you manage to indemnify some of the output? Stuff like that. Do you carry the necessary insurances that are required by most large enterprises? What have you. I'm not going to go into this in a whole lot of detail, but these are just some examples of some of the types of information we're going to collect, as well as we break it down into each different criteria. You'll notice what's missing from this is a gradation scale. For some of these questions, we were able to kind of hypothesize on how we might score 1, 0 to 3, but in the beginning, it's going to be much more subjective until we get enough critical mass and responses to be able to differentiate between those different levels of success and failure. Okay, so this is just one of the criteria, employment classification engagement. This was identified as a key obstacle for most enterprises. How do you go about validating that you are indeed compliant? What's your background check process? What about your ability to pay and engage individuals internationally? Beyond that, we go into security and privacy is where we get into some of the more technical aspects of it. intellectual property. How do you go about ensuring that the different NDAs and you're managing the different confidentiality provisions of various systems? Fiscal process and stability. How many currencies can you transaction? Which countries are you authorized to transact in? Do you accept P cards or funds held in escrow? Those sorts of things. And then, of course, platform improvement and roadmap. Contract and insurance, SLA should be clear and reasonable, and contract provisions should strive to align with most of the enterprise standard requirements around insurance and indemnity. Then we think about the client experience, talking about the customer support and success process. How do you ensure customer success? A key element that was identified as an area of interest amongst all of the platforms was what element of platforms are interoperable with another? Do you have open APIs? Do you integrate with existing systems? Those sorts of things. What is your platform? How easy is it to use? And then we're going to conduct client feedback and interviews and integrate case studies into that. These are some of the questions that we identified as part of the scaling process for customer information. And this is the API interoperability questions that were come up by the core team as well. I'm certainly not a technical guy by any measure. So these are things that we're certainly welcoming feedback on what we should include or if we're actually crazy. Platform experience, ease of use. And then we move on to the talent experience. Performance management, compensation alignments, and transparency. How do you align your compensation to successful outcomes? What sort of value add do you have within your platform? Are you simply just engaging in putting people to work, or do you have community standards or community benefits or offer different sort of inclusion benefits and things like that? And then we're of course going to incorporate talent and crowd member feedback and interviews into the process as well. These are some of the questions. Thank you to Andy and Chris and Jeff for some of these things are really very well articulated to be the advocate for the talent. I kind of played with it to have it be a much more open-ended question. But how does your platform distinguish between high-performing and low-performing members? What resources do you provide for members to self-educate and improve their performance? What is the process for managing talent disputes? And then, of course, how do you find and manage and attract new talent to your platform? By no means are these exhaustive, or maybe these will be them. These are just some examples. Compensation alignment and transparency was also a huge issue, something that people were very passionate about. And specifically with some of the conversation around fairness and equity in the kind of all of us enjoying the fruits of this new economy, we want to make sure that we incorporate that into how we evaluate and look at platforms as well. And of course, talent value add. Talking about there. And then finally, this is one that I was actually very surprised wasn't a huge topic, which is the core function of platforms. And I was just talking about this with Steve Rader before during our one-on-one, is the matching process. And I say it's an orphan because it wasn't something that was brought up a whole lot, but I certainly think it's something that we should at least track and identify, is how do we go about matching? What is the fundamental nature of the match between supply and demand? How do you ensure cultural fit? And then the question really for the group is, what else should we consider when it comes to the matching algorithm? What are those things that we need to address? So these are just some of the things that we've come up with, and thank you to John Healy for some of his perspective on this as well. What is the matching, how is the matching interaction client to provider conducted? To what extent does the platform automate the matching of solution providers? How do you ensure proper cultural and candidate fit? And how do you address potential bias and diversity in your candidate matching process? So next steps, I think we presented the initial criteria, which you did. Then we're going to solicit your feedback to what we've shown so far. And I think Brandon's going to share this deck to everybody. Integrate that feedback, identify beta subjects, and finalize timeline. This is the link for the survey. That picture is my daughter. I love that picture, so I always like to showcase her as much as possible. But this is the survey to get your feedback on what we presented so far, which I think is pretty good. The goal is to get to a final MVP and framework by the end of the month. So, if you'll reference last time, we said that we'd have a framework done by March 31st, and we're just a little late. We're a day late, but still, we come with something that's ready for public consumption thereafter. So without further ado, let's go get going. And if you have any questions, I'll go ahead and reserve questions if anyone has questions right now.
Thanks, Brian. That was super awesome. Lots of great work. Any questions from anybody?
I just have a comment. I thought that was really excellent to bring in Maslow's theory. I think it's great to sort of think about, you know, the security and safety sort of measures that are at the bare minimum. And I think that's important for organizations to really think through. So highlighting that comes a long way. So yeah, awesome.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, really, really awesome work. I know today has been a lot of stuff. Balaji, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, my only concern is there's no uniformity of the types of roles and jobs and outcomes that all of the platforms perform. There is just such diversity of it. Accreditation kind of seems to force them down a channel, which over a period of time might create a disincentive for diversity and like your thinking and choices. Also, there's enough diversity already, which means that if we just shouldn't pick models that we think are better versus the others. So I want to ensure that this accreditation process doesn't in some way disincentivize newer models and everybody look similar.
I love that, Balaji. I mean, one of the thoughts we had in the group was just making sure that it's really loose, that it's inclusive to start with, right? That we can, as a community, decide what's important to make sure that those big things are ticked off: workers' rights, security, IP, those kinds of things, but allow for lots of innovation that happens as well. So yeah, great point.
Very good point.
Anything else? No.
If I'm thinking about the experiment phase that organizations are going to be in, that's a time to try things with maybe a startup versus when you're going to scale and you need more structure in something that's there. So I think there's a lot of room to use this. We just have to be careful about how we think about it, and especially as we get to scoring it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that, John. I think that's an awesome insight. I really, really appreciate that. Hey, no, we're coming up. We got about 3 minutes left. Hey, Chris, Chris joined the call late. Chris Stanton from Harvard's been doing a lot of good research and stuff. But Jeff Schwartz, are you still on the call? I just saw you there just a second ago. I don't know if you jumped off or not. Okay, no, good. Hey, I just finished Jeff's book. Really, really good. So check it out. I just finished it yesterday. So good job on the book. One of my favorite things, Jeff, is that you give a really good overview of the whole marketplace, not just open talent, but AI and everything else changing in the work world. But I really love the fact that you referenced so many different things and footnoted it so well. So many books these days aren't footnoted well, and you kind of get into one idea and you can't go any deeper. And so I really appreciate that. Thanks again. So make sure we did somebody, Brandon just put it in there. So buy a book for Jeff and let's get this on the bestseller list. So
thank you, John.
Yeah, you bet. Hey, Chris, you're always dropping some huge insights from your work and all the data you work with. What are you seeing out there, and what could you add to us to kind of end the day today?
Well, thanks, John. And sorry, I've been a bit absent. Many of the meetings overlap with my teaching, and I've been doing quite a lot of teaching on some of these topics. And I wish that I had the content that I saw today to bring into class with me to update my students about what's going on in the ecosystem. So it's really been fascinating to listen. One thing that's top of mind for me is if you've been keeping up with the regulatory environment around the PRO Act that is in the House, this is going to dramatically change what this ecosystem might look like if it has a prayer of passing. My guess is it probably won't get through the Senate, but it basically applies the Dynamex ABC test nationwide without the carve-outs for people who are setting their own prices, which would dramatically change how you might think about sort of the open ecosystem versus traditional W-2 employment. I've run a survey on this to try and look at what fraction of work on the demand side and the supply side would violate one of the tenets of the Dynamex ABC test. And it turns out that this would be dramatic. And as a result, I've also asked mostly small business owners what would happen in the absence of being able to have access to the open talent resources that they're currently using. And many of them report that they would no longer get the work done, meaning they would turn the work that they're currently doing away to someone else, would fail to do it, or would cripple their business. And so for those of you who haven't been keeping up with what's happening on the regulatory front, it's just something that should probably be top of mind if you're talking to other people about what the effects of this proposed legislation would have. And obviously the legislation is intended to target people who are earning very little in rote gig roles, but it's also going to have dramatic spillover effects for the open innovation types of ecosystems that we all care about. So on that pleasant note, welcome back to me. And I hope to be able to join more of these calls in the future, but I think that this should be something that should be on everybody's radar, and to write to people about your perspective if you haven't.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. I really appreciate. Sometimes we get so down in the weeds that we forget the kind of larger cultural context of what's happening. So really important to keep that in mind. I think this is an important discussion that we should really dive into. David Bogenhausen's leading the advocacy group. So I'd love for you guys to connect and get deeper into how we can facilitate or support, the right points of view, and anything we can do as a group to help that out would be really awesome. Well, look, it looks like we're at time, man. What a day. Sorry to overwhelm you guys. Usually, can we have a little bit of more of a free for all conversation and open dialogue. So appreciate your guys' patience of wading through all this stuff that we went through today. But great job to Katrina and Brian and Jeff on dropping all the knowledge on us. And certainly got lots of improvement to do, but I just wanted to show you guys that all those kind of great, calls for weeks and weeks and months haven't gone unrewarded, and we're making some progress towards creating something that can really help, with the adoption process. So also I'd love to call out Todd Burris for a great job on Clubhouse. That was a really, really amazing session last week.
Balaji, we need to get you on the platform, man.
I
So
know, right? I know.
Gotta get you, Balaji.
Yeah.
What's
So
it gonna
Todd, what do you
take?
got? What do you got cooking for this month? Are you open to some ideas? Let's like group kind of come up with some ideas and drop them on you.
Yes, please. If you have any ideas, please send me.
Awesome. Okay. Any last comments from anybody? Nothing. All right. Love you guys, man. Thanks so much for taking the time. Just always love this discussion, and super fun to see not only the energy and the progress, but Steve, just amazing stats from out of NASA, and just man, oh man. Yeah, I think it points to the future being really bright for this whole movement. So as long as we can overcome some of the cultural winds that are out there and keep going in the right direction. So thanks again, guys. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you in a couple weeks. All the best.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Brandon.
Ciao.
Oh.
Hi, everyone.